I'll be speaking about the challenges and potential solutions of medical medevac in Africa. First thing I want to ask, sorry, I talk quite a lot. I want to find out if, for those of you seated here, have you explored to find out if you had an emergency, what number will you dial? Does anyone know the answer? You can indicate by a show of hands. That's the thing. If you fly to a region like Africa and you do not plan for emergencies, you'll be caught unawares. I'll quickly tell a story. So we have lots of people come to Nigeria, Ghana, and they begin to call us. They probably have tried the National Emergency Service, and nobody is picking their call. And then they call us and they say, well, I have an emergency in my hotel. Can you come right away? We're in private service. You have to pay first. Oh no, how would you be talking about payment? Aren't you medical? Aren't you supposed to look after the, yeah, but we're in business. So that's the problem. You're here, the number is 150, just in case an emergency comes. So you should always know that. So that's the big question. You're coming to a region like ours, we unfortunately do not have that emergency service for everybody, readily available and easily accessible. So you might have to sign up or discuss with some private providers to get that sorted. I'll talk about ourselves. We are holistic care medical services. We are a medical assistance company. We do a lot of medical evacuation. We do guarantee of payment. We also run an occupational health clinic, and we are across West and Central Africa. That's our base. Leads me on to this important part because I know my colleagues are ready to take me on. Exactly. I'm going to be talking about challenges in Africa, quite differently from, the challenges are quite peculiar in some parts, different from others. And Africa, I put this tale of two cities because when you watch the mass media, they are probably talking about the picture on the right when you're talking of sub-Saharan Africa. You're looking at bad roads, poverty and all that. But in actual sense, in some parts of Africa, you're talking about the picture on the left, where it's all, you're in Marrakesh, it's a beautiful place. You go to some other countries, lovely, some other regions, even with country good. Africa has a lot of inequality. So whatever I am describing here, here's the disclaimer, is not a pictorial representation of the whole of Africa. Yeah. Yes. Let's take that. What's medical evacuation? Medical evacuation, like I said, must be timely, efficient, and safe transportation of an injured patient from one place to another, usually from a place of limited medical services to one with higher medical service. Why is it important for us, especially in Africa? Because we house, using those statistics, about 1.5 billion people. That's 18% of the world population. We bear 25% of the world burden, and unfortunately, we only have a little less than 3% of the medical workforce. The implication of that is a lot of the people will have to seek the 97% of the medical workforce outside of Africa. We spend quite a lot of our GDP and our money on medical evacuation. Statistics vary and are far between, but the closest I can get is the National Bureau of Statistics from Nigeria. Yeah. And they put it roughly at about $1 billion per year on medical tourism. And that's encompassing the flight, the medical treatment, and all that. Medical evacuation, as important as it is, because we do a lot, tons of medical evacuation in Africa. Lots of people are going out to seek medical care. Unlike the Middle East, where now people are looking inwards and getting care inwards. A lot of us have to go out because, like I said, just 3% of the population of medical workforce is sitting in the continent. Yeah. So there are different challenges to it, ranging from things like geographical challenges. Infrastructure is something we talk about time and again. I was telling someone that my grandfather spoke about it, my father's did. My kids are going to talk about infrastructural challenges in Africa, unfortunately. But we're getting there gradually. Healthcare system challenges is also big, and then we have bureaucratic and administrative challenges. Geographical landscape, I'm sure when you were flying in, you would have seen a lot of mountainous areas in Africa that are not habitable, not motorable. Yeah, that's just how the landscape is. There's nothing we can do about that. Now, infrastructural challenges. This is where we're going to spend a couple of minutes. Fiscal infrastructure. We're gradually improving on it, but it's a big challenge in Africa. We have poor road network, very, very limited railways across the continent. Very few countries have railway systems. Our airports are dicey. We have a few, and some regions that even have airports are not they don't run round the clock, so they have limited operating hours. The other big thing is the big margin between the urban centers and the rural centers in terms of health infrastructure. This is important because a lot of our medical evacuations will happen in the regions that are not with limited medical services. Because these are the regions where the mining occurs, these are the regions where the drillings and the oil and gas occurs, what happens. People will have to, incidences and accidents will happen, and then people have to be moved to the urban areas. Of course, communication is a problem among the healthcare facilities. So a lot of times when this thing happens, like Ozen will say, you have to call the medical doctors or the managing physicians. They themselves might sometimes be limited because what the history of the patient they see is the much they're seeing at the moment. They don't have previous history, and that could be a factor, especially in a patient who comes in unconscious. The other big challenge is health policies. And again, health policies varies from region to region, but some regions are really struggling with it. Some have that in place. Some have it in place and are not, they're not able to follow up. There's poor supervision. And the big one, which sadly occurs quite often, is medical fraud. I'll talk a bit more about this later on in the slide. One big problem we have, I remember someone telling us to get pick a patient from the north, Central African Republic, which is just north of Nigeria, and it's just a less than 1 hour flight to get the patient. The big problem is you cannot just jump on a plane and go to these countries. You would need a visa. And I wanted to ask, by the show of hands, do you know, for a British passport holder, do you know how many visas he or she would need to traverse across Europe? Any ideas? No. Okay. For a Nigerian passport holder, if I had to come to Marrakesh, or I had to go to Egypt, how many visas do you think are required to move across Africa? There are 52 countries in Africa. How many visas do you think I need if I had to go across the 52 countries? A guess, anybody?
52.
That's what you say.
52. For every country.
Between 35 and 38, that's a lot. Imagine having to drop your passport at different embassies to do your job. It's frustrating.
5 years.
I don't know if I should say this, but coming to Marrakesh, it took a colleague 3 weeks to get his passport back. We had to call the consulate before we got. So those are the sort of challenges we have. Now imagine we had to do a medivac, for instance. Do you understand? 3 weeks. As part of the solution, which I'll be talking about later, is we've had to cut the consulates of different regions in order to make our visas for our medics seamless. But even at that, we sometimes spend 48 hours, 72 hours waiting for visas for essential, urgent medical evacuation missions. And that's a big challenge. How many languages are spoken across Africa? A hazard guess. Different languages. You're cheating. Yeah, there are over 2,000 languages. Yeah. Nigeria alone, they speak 500 languages. So if you see two Nigerians, they probably do not have the same local dialect. Yeah. English unites, English and French across most of African countries. You have some other countries, very few speaking Portuguese and another one speaking Spanish. Yeah. But most of them, English and French. That's the unifying language. Otherwise, we'll be interacting with over 2,000 languages. That's again another challenge, because when you get to a region, the people who are not so learned would speak their local dialects. You have to try and interact with them in that language. I spoke earlier about overcharging and medical fraud for medical services. This is really big because we have very poor regulation and people get insured, especially people who live in Western countries come over, they tend to connive or tend to go back and submit false claims of, of medical treatment which they've gotten in Africa. A lot of times, because it's difficult for the insurance companies to verify from these local hospitals, they pay the claims. I'll give an example. There's this, I think they're represented here. They had this client who kept coming to a particular country in Africa, getting care for malaria, and was charging $2,000. So they kept paying it. I think they paid it about 6 times. And they didn't have an issue, $2,000 equivalent. It was good. And I think the person just said, oh, I'm making free 2K. Why not let me make more? And came back and tried and did it, went back and submitted $20,000 worth of medical inputs. And at that point, they were like, hey, this is quite a lot. So they sent it to us to investigate. First of all, we went there, and the hospital was like, wait a minute. We don't know this person. This person hasn't been coming. So what happens is the person probably just had a friend in the hospital, and they connived and they started with the 2,000 and they were going good and they were getting the claims each time. So each time he flies, he gets malaria treatment, $2,000 goes back, and he did it about 6 times, and he said, oh, this is good business. And came and decided, oh, why do I have to do 2,000? Why not let me make it 20,000 at once? I make good money. And he did, and then, so he was exposed. And that is just one of the myriads of insurance fraud we get, especially in the health sector. Because it's difficult for these insurance companies to confirm from the hospital, a lot of times they just pay it out. If they had to verify it, it's going to cost them money, it's going to cost them time, and they want to avoid litigation. So people get away with it, and the more people get away with it, the more people say, oh, that's a good means of making money, more people engage in it. I have another case here. This one was quite significant because, it just happened this last month. This patient was supposed to get dialysis from a hospital in West Africa, from one of the countries in West Africa. And we saw a GOP, they asked us to place a GOP of 300 euros per dialysis session. I practice in West and Central Africa. This is outrageous. So I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. So what we did is we got our local rep to go to the hospital and confirm how much the price of dialysis is per session. And we found out that it's $60 to $70 for a non-resident, for a resident, and then they are subsequently, that's for the first session, and they're charged $56 per session. For non-residents, it's around $80. So what happened is that person is probably conniving with someone that works in the hospital to rip off his insurance. And we had to go back to the insurance company and say, hey, we're not going to place a GOP for this because this is clearly insurance fraud. So these are sorts of things we experience in the region. And that's like a 500% increase from what the normal cost is. Again, bureaucratic and economic divides. Across Africa, there are 40 different currencies. Different countries spending different things. Some of them are unified, such as the francs. The Western and the Central Africans, they spend the francs, and that's a bit easier because it's one-to-one. But when you go to the East, you see them spending shillings. And it's one Tanzanian shilling is not equivalent to 1 Kenyan shilling. And these are neighboring countries. So you cannot say, oh, I have a Tanzanian shilling, I'm going across and I'm going to spend it in Kenya. No, it's not, because it's not even one-to-one. So this currency divide is a big problem, and it's a barrier to trade. It's a barrier to medical evacuation. What we tend to do, and I'll talk about that in solutions, is we now have to tend to have banks and money ports in different currencies in order for us to pay out our vendors pretty easily. What are the other challenges? I know we've spoken about security challenges, and I think I'll talk about this a bit more. In a place like DRC, there are 120 militia groups in that country alone. So you can imagine it's a large sparse of land. And there is almost always something in different regions, so you have to be careful. It's not just that. In other parts of Africa, there are militia groups, and there are conflicts and sectarian violence that makes it difficult for you to move across. Healthcare costs. A lot of us have to pay out of the pocket. I know you're talking a lot about insurance. In my region, unfortunately, we're still struggling with insurance. Insurance companies, like you heard, some of them just refuse to. I find that unfair. Some of them just refuse to cover some regions, so they just say, if you go to this country, we're not going to cover you. That is unfair, and I'll talk about that a bit more later. But yes, we have to pay out of the pocket when we have medical emergencies, and that's a big barrier and a big factor. Of course, economic inequalities. Like I said earlier, tale of two cities. You have some people very affluent, and you have some people who are extremely, extremely poor. Belief system, I'll just breeze on this. There is a particular country, a region in a particular country that they do not believe in ambulance. And they are thinking, or their ideology is the people who get on the ambulance ultimately die. So they will not get on the ambulance because they believe they're going to die. So they don't do ambulances. We have to use buses, put a stretcher in it, do not paint it, and they do not make it an ambulance. Just make it a bus, pick them, then they'll go on it. But if you make it an ambulance, it's not even, nobody's going to go on it. We've talked about the problems. What are the steps we're looking to take, or we're taking, to try and bridge this gap? We have offices in these countries because one size does not fit all. You have to, like I told you, different languages, different currencies. You have to be able to adapt to local challenges. Local staffing, our staffings are multicultural. In our meetings, we'll tell you that we have some people who don't even speak English, they speak French. So we have to have a translator because we deal in about 30 countries, and different people with different, so yeah, language is an issue. We have staffing from different places, people telling us about the different challenges they have in this region. That's the only way we can provide a solution that will benefit our clients. Again, I already talked about, we have over 30 bank accounts in different currencies. We depend heavily on the young tech guys who have put in fintech to make a lot of sub-Saharan African countries now use what they call mobile money, MOMO. That's a very good way to transact money, but again, it's in country. So from my own country, I'm not able to send money to the next country, but in country I can. So we have to have MOMOs of different currencies to be able to transfer monies to vendors very quickly. And then, yeah, sometimes you have to go around your own infrastructure. I had a client come back to us. A client asked us to pick a patient in one of the Central African countries via ground ambulance, and the quote we sent was in the rate just a little less than $10,000. And they're going screaming. And I said, look, this place you're asking us to go, we have to go with military, really, and we have to pay the military aside from the ground ambulance service. So you won't get it for less. And they did their findings, and they found out that no other person was going to go to the region. They won't even get a helicopter go over there to pick the patient because of the security challenges in the region. So yes, you have to go with your own infrastructure. We talked about things like poor road network. So the ambulances would depreciate much faster than it would depreciate if it were in some other countries with good road network, and for obvious reasons. If you are bumping into potholes all the time, you do not expect to keep the vehicle as sound as in a place with good roads. Innovation solutions and best practices. Yeah, we're looking to deploy telemedicine to rural areas, to areas that where you have the mining sector, where you have the oil and gas. But again, the local facilities there have to work with us, and other infrastructural facilities that we need, like telecoms, is not very strong in those regions. So even if you deploy telemedicine to those places, you need to rely on communication and all the internet facilities for it to work. So yeah, we're getting there. We have the roadmap, but it's going to take some time. The other important thing is, and which we are actually sourcing for funds for, and I'll talk about that in the subsequent slide, is training first responders. So we want to be able to be sure that even if these hospitals are not as equipped as they should be, we have people who are able to at least keep the patient alive till the ground ambulance gets there, till the air ambulance gets there to pick the patient. And it's at that point we begin to talk about what I said earlier. At that point you're looking at, if this patient remains here, 100%, he or she is going to die. If he flies, the risk is 70%. But if he gets to the other country safely, despite that 70%, yes, there's a higher chance of survival. You have to fly. You have to fly. You just have to fly. So you're going to spend quite a lot of money to fly a patient with prognosis or very poor prognosis to a region where you think there's better care. Again, roadmap for the future, sustainable funding, that's exactly what we're looking at. The government alone is not able to take care of, and this is the world over, the government alone cannot take care of the healthcare challenges. We need philanthropists, we need donors to help us. And I know one organization here that is really making giant strides in that, going out sourcing for funds, being able to provide medical evacuation in their region. And that's what we're looking at in our region, in the West and Central African countries. Particular importance is one of the new military juntas who just became a dictator, had some of us in the room and was discussing on how he can, when he was running for, he's now president, when he was moving from military to civilian, he wanted to put out a proposal on what he's going to do for his people. And he called, I was there, I was part of the health sector, and we were looking at sustainable funding because the country is good, but at the moment they do not have enough funds to sustain the health sector. So they need the sustainable fundings from philanthropists and private sector to be able to drive and provide some degree of stability in terms of healthcare sector for that region. The other thing we are trying to work on in a lot in West African countries is the Bolt. Bolt is a brand, it's like Uber. Is the stronger Uber equivalent in our region. I think they're from they're from Europe, one of the small countries in Europe. We're looking to be able to integrate ambulance services onto this app, such that if you have the app, you can actually order an ambulance to your place. So I'm going to go back to the instance where I said someone gets into a hotel in, I'll say Nigeria, has an emergency and is calling a private ambulance company. The ambulance company is going to say, hey, you have to pay before you get the medical service. But if you have a Bolt app, you go on the app, and then you can easily order it, and it comes immediately, because obviously it will either charge you cash upon arrival, or it's charged on your card. So you do not have that barrier of having to make payment, then the company confirms that they've seen payment before they begin to deploy an ambulance in an emergency situation, which I know is not ideal. But infrastructure and tech investments, we have a lot of young guys these days who are doing a lot of groundbreaking work in terms of technology in Africa, and I doff my hat for them. We are pushing them to also integrate the healthcare sector so that we bring some of this technology to be able to promote healthcare. Use of drones. I have some colleagues who are using that to deliver bloods. We are also looking to using that to deliver AEDs. But again, training is important. Local empowerment and training. That's the roadmap for the future. I think I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tommy. Before we go to questions, you have touched a couple of times on trying to get an ambulance in Nigeria. So I'm really interested to know, I've been to Nigeria, I've been to quite a few places. Usually something happens to me. Sometimes it's my own fault, like I've jumped off the mountain in Cape Town, or I've gone with sharks. You know, I usually put myself at a little bit of risk. But let's just say I was just having a business trip and we went to Accra, and I fell sick, and I thought I actually need an ambulance, I need some urgent care. What would my journey then look like once I decided actually grow up, you do actually need some help?
The typical thing you would do, you go online and you look for the National Emergency Service. You call them, you might not get to them. But when you get to them,
we get someone.
You know, there might be a wait.
Okay.
So what you want to do is to contact the private ambulance services. You might have to pay before you get them. So it's not going to be straightforward. And that's why we always advocate that you have a local agent before you move to countries like this, so that when such an eventuality or occurrence happens, you're able to get that care.
So it's not going to be straightforward.
It's not.
Bernadette, is it better in South Africa?
It is.
You are, aren't you? I think.
Okay. It is. There's no question that in the 54 countries that make up sub-Saharan Africa, that South Africa is a privileged country. There are the private sector, there is the government sector. The moral code and ethos is stabilised no matter who's going to pay it, who's going to do what. Does it always work? No, it doesn't. In the private sector, the ambulance services are most certainly going to come out. They are going to fill in forms. If there's a relative present, they're going to go to a private facility. If there's a relative present, they may very well ask for cost. Very often, we as an assistance company based in Joburg, if it's what ends up with us, we'll probably end up getting the ambulance bill because within the whole remit of the hospital the patient's gone to. If we then flip over to the government sector, that again is a little bit different. But the government sector will turn up. The question, as Dr. Tommy has said, is how long will it take? And undoubtedly, they are going to go to a government hospital, which is where the patient's nightmare begins. However, the same rule of thumb will apply, stabilise, whether it's government, they're going to fix it. However, the rule of thumb, again, in South Africa is that a government bed in a government hospital should not actually be rendered to a non-South African citizen. And we have had a situation where a hospital manager in the government sector was actually fired for allowing a Zimbabwean, not even an international patient, into that government bed to make a point. Was that hospital full? Absolutely not. It's as Tommy has said, it's not perfect. It works as it works and how it works.
Politics. Tommy, in your region, is it save lives no matter what the cost, or give me the cost and then we'll think about it? In the nicest possible way.
It's difficult to roll out an ambulance if you're not sure how you're going to be paid. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable.
Yeah. Anybody got any questions from the audience? Bilge, the microphone is just coming.
Well, I listen to you as you were a magician, because you talked about lots of difficulties, and I thank you that I wasn't aware Africa has that much diversified culture, because when we look at Asian countries, they are almost the same. They have differences, surely, but they have some bases which are so similar. Also, we see the same thing in the European countries, but I wasn't aware that these difficulty is on our table. And you said that you have cultural difficulties also, but at the end of this slide, you talked about what's coming soon. And digitalization and other fintech issues are coming, you said. It's very good to hear it, but how this cultural barrier affect that, let's say, evolution? Maybe it's a revolution, I don't know. How do you name it?
Thank you. That's a good question. Especially looking at the future, what we are happy to see is that digitalization is educating the people. So lots of beliefs people have had over the years, lots of clinical or health practices that they've been accustomed to. With social media, with them watching Instagram and all of that, they're seeing that this is not, it doesn't hold true, and it's beginning to challenge their belief, and people are beginning to embrace newer ideas. So yes, if we're able to move on with that, we'll be able to educate people and change the way of thinking.
So I want to come to both of you now, because we've spoken about what happens if a patient needs some medical help. But let's just say there's a bigger event, you know, maybe a coach crash or something. How in the region would, say, Red Star prepare for a mass evacuation or a mass event with a lot of trauma that you needed to offer help with? And then we'll come to Dr. Tommy just to see how it would work in your region.
Thank you, Mark, for the question. Actually, we have the capability to transfer multiple patients in our challengers. They are equipped with 3 ICU stretchers. This is the worst condition that we can manage for the mass evacuation. Apart from that, we are providing services for the United Nations. So we do frequently fly to the region, sometimes ad hoc missions, sometimes standby missions. And for the last time, we assigned one of our challenges with a medical team on board, but without stretchers. For mass evacuation, we have proper, of course, patients or people under medical supervision, acute, of course, the team was acute, and we transfer them on seated position. So there are two options: triple stretcher, multiple transportation, and seated transportation. This is the solution that we offer at the moment. Apart from that, sometimes we receive non-medical, let's say, evacuations, and if it's required, the number is higher than just our capability, then we utilize wide-body airline aircraft, we can say wide bodies, to transfer them out with our partners. So this is a solution that we'll do for mass evacuation.
Thank you, Tommy. In your region, if there was a mass problem with international tourists?
We might be reactive for that. I'm not sure we have those structures for something proactive. But the good thing about our culture is we're communal, so you always have that support of people, and that will make a difference.
Great. Any more questions before we wrap up? I've got one more question, and you spoke about currency. So in Europe, as we know, it's the euro everywhere apart from 2 or 3 countries, and you can always spend or change as you wish. In Africa, let's just say we had someone in Zimbabwe who had originated in Zambia, and they had a pocket full of kwachas. How far is that going to get them?
Nowhere.
In Zimbabwe, we'll all be billionaires,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Pick another country then. I've always wanted to get the word kwachas out, and now I have. Because it's just the best sounding currency.
Yeah,
It's impossible, so always go with dollars. Yeah. What we're going to do now, we're going to move on to medical management. But before we do, we're going to have a very quick change round, just freshen the stage up. Please join me in thanking Ozan and Dr. Tommy. Thank you so much. We'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere, we need you.